All right, imagine this picture in your head, okay? It's the 1860s, New York City, lavish dinner party, guests, diamonds, the best wine. But here's the thing. Some of these guests, infamous criminals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the woman running the show, Frederica Mandelbaum, the godmother of American organized crime.
I've heard that name.
We're diving deep into her life today
Oh, is
using
it?
this new biography, The Talented Mrs. Mandelbaum. It's by Margarite Fox. And you might be surprised to hear this. Frederica.
Yeah.
Not your typical mob boss.
Really?
Yeah. She built this massive criminal empire in a man's world, no less, and she did it all without a lot of violence.
That's fascinating. It really challenges what we think a criminal mastermind looks like. Someone so strategic, operating in a world dominated by men and using nonviolent methods. It's pretty remarkable.
So how did she go from immigrant to, criminal queen pin?
Right.
I mean, she gets to New York in 1850 with basically nothing. Poverty, hardship, even the death of her baby daughter. It's tough to imagine.
It is, and that's what makes her story so compelling. Think about the challenges she faced. She starts out as a peddler just trying to survive in Kleindeutschland, Little Germany, which was known for, well, poverty and hardship. But Frederica, she was not your average peddler.
She was a sharp one, for sure. I mean, she saw that there was this whole system of thieves,
Oh, yeah.
corrupt officials, all operating right there
Oh.
under everyone's noses. Historians call it the crooked ladder.
The cricket ladder.
Yeah, this network, connecting the underworld to legitimate power structures. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It is, and it highlights how those lines between legitimate business and the criminal world were incredibly blurred, especially in 19th century New York.
Yeah, and Frederica, she was a master at exploiting those blurred lines, let me tell you.
So she becomes Marm Mandelbaum, right?
Exactly.
And she wasn't just running a business, she was building a community, a family almost.
Yeah, she had her chicks, as she called them, the thieves who worked for her. And she didn't just pay them, she took care of them. Support, connections, even getaway horses. Can you imagine?
That's amazing. Talk about employee benefits, right?
I know.
But it shows how she understood loyalty, the importance of community. She gave her chicks more than just a way to make money, a sense of belonging, like a purpose. It's fascinating. It's like she applied this modern business acumen, even corporate culture, to the criminal world.
It's true. So let's break down how this whole operation worked.
Yeah.
Basically, she was like a master fence, taking stolen goods, figuring out what they were really worth, and then selling them off at a profit. But get this, she was undercutting legitimate businesses the whole time.
Wow.
It's almost like a 19th century version of market disruption, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And the scale of her business was incredible. We're not talking about, petty theft here. This is millions of dollars worth of goods, a network spanning the entire country.
It really makes you think. She created this whole shadow economy, tapping into this, growing middle class that wanted luxury but couldn't always afford it.
Yeah.
So was Frederica really that different from those legitimate tycoons of the Gilded Age?
Now, there's a question worth pondering, because both Frederica and these legitimate tycoons, they both operated in a system riddled with corruption, exploitation, just different arenas, right? It's like they were playing the same game, just by different rules.
And then there's Frederica the person. Imagine this. Nearly 6 feet tall, imposing, powerful, but also warm, motherly, and when she needed to be, tough as nails. What a paradox.
She was a complex figure. Frederica embodied both sides, the nurturing side and the cutthroat side of leadership. She was the savvy businesswoman, but also a devoted mother, beloved by her community. It really reflects the contradictions of the Gilded Age, this time of incredible wealth, but also built on, the backs of the marginalized and exploited.
Right, and to add to that, the social context is crucial here. This is the Gilded Age. Fortunes being made left and right, but often through ruthless means. So, Frederica, was she really that different from the robber barons building their empires through legitimate businesses? It makes you think about how society defines criminal,
Exactly. It challenges us to look beyond simple labels and examine those systems of power that shape our perceptions. This is more than just one woman. It's a glimpse into how society grapples with ambition, morality, and success, right?
It's true. And here's where things take a really interesting turn. The Greenback Revolution. This completely changed the criminal landscape. I bet most people don't even realize how big of a deal this was.
Yeah, you're right. Most people don't think about how something like paper money could impact the criminal world. Before the Civil War, gold was the main currency, and it was a pain to transport. So bank heists, not worth it. But then the greenback comes along.
Right.
And suddenly, stealing paper money becomes much more appealing.
Makes sense. It's lighter, easier to hide, easier to spend. So Frederica, always the entrepreneur, sees this opportunity and, well, shifts gears.
Exactly. Starts thinking bigger, masterminding. Elaborate bank heists, like the one at the Ocean National Bank in 1869.
Yep.
Her crew walks away with $800,000, which would be, think about this, over $17 million today, plus a ton of jewels and gold.
Wait, so just to recap here, we have this woman who starts with nothing, becomes head of a criminal empire, and then pulls off heists that would make Hollywood jealous.
It's incredible, but it's all meticulously documented. Frederica Mandelbaum's story forces us to re-examine history, to challenge our assumptions about power, about who has it and how they get it.
It's a story that's almost too wild to believe.
But it's true.
It really is.
I mean, it's remarkable, right, how she built this. Vast and influential networks, starting from practically nothing.
It makes you wonder what we really know
Yeah.
about organized crime. I always picture violence, intimidation, that sort of thing. But Frederica, she built her empire on smarts, strategy, understanding people.
She was like a chess grandmaster, always thinking ahead. But what I find fascinating is how she managed to operate so openly for so long. You'd think the authorities would have caught on sooner.
Right. It's like she was hiding in plain sight.
Well, remember, the underworld and the so-called legitimate world, they were deeply intertwined back then, especially in 19th century New York. And Frederica didn't just exploit those blurred lines. She cultivated relationships, with people in power, politicians, high-ranking police officers. She knew how to play the game.
So she was working the system from the inside out, like a master manipulator, leveraging connections to protect her interests.
Exactly. She understood that power wasn't just brute force. It was about influence, connections, knowing how to use them. And that's still relevant today, right? Whether it's necus politics, even just social dynamics. Knowing how to navigate those networks, it's crucial.
It makes you wonder, how much did being a woman play into her success, do you think? She could have worked those power dynamics effectively if she had been a man.
That's a great question. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? On the one hand, being a woman might have made her seem less threatening, allowing her to move more freely in circles where women weren't usually seen as a threat. But then again, she was up against the same prejudices, limitations as all women in that era.
So almost like she turned those limitations into advantages. It speaks to her intelligence, her adaptability.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the sheer audacity of it all. This immigrant woman building and running a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise right under the noses of the authorities. It's a story about ambition, right? Entrepreneurial spirit, thriving on the edges of society.
You mentioned earlier that Frederica's business was surprisingly nonviolent, but I'm thinking there had to be some element of danger involved, right? It couldn't have all been easy.
Of course not. Well, Frederica herself didn't engage in violence. Her whole operation depended on, thieves and burglars, and those activities inherently carry risks.
So there was always that possibility of something going wrong, someone getting hurt or caught or even worse.
Exactly. And those risks just multiplied as her ambitions grew. The heists became more elaborate. It was a high-stakes game, for sure, and the consequences could be severe.
Like that Ocean National Bank robbery we talked about earlier.
A perfect example, That heist was a turning point in Frederica's career. It showed her brilliance, but also the potential fallout. But it's interesting. It also highlights her connection to the technological advancements of the time.
I'm curious, what do you mean by that?
Think about the tools of her trade, right? Safecracking, for instance. It required this deep understanding of mechanics, engineering. And as technology advanced, so did the techniques criminals used to exploit it.
So like a constant race. The people trying to protect their valuables and the people trying to steal them.
Precisely. And Frederica, always ahead of the curve, making sure her network had the latest tools, techniques, almost like a tech entrepreneur, innovating, adapting, staying one step ahead.
That's a great point. Like, she was a disruptor in the criminal underworld, always finding new ways to challenge the system, exploit those weaknesses.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And in a way, she unintentionally contributed to the evolution of law enforcement, security practices. By pushing those boundaries, she forced the authorities to come up with new strategies, new technologies to counter her moves.
Her legacy goes way beyond just the criminal world then.
Exactly. Her story impacts how we understand economics, technology, social norms, even the nature of power itself.
It's amazing how one woman's life can be so complex.
And we haven't even touched on the psychological side of her story, like
Mm.
what drove her ambition? How did she reconcile being a criminal mastermind with being a mother, a respected member of her community?
It's like there's this whole other layer to her story, one that goes beyond the facts.
So many unanswered questions about her motivations, her inner conflicts. But for now, let's focus on the final chapter, shall we? Her downfall and the legacy she left behind.
This is where this story takes a dramatic turn, right?
Yeah. You could say that. Remember how the political and social landscape had shifted. By the 1880s, a new generation of reformers, they wanted to clean up the city, consolidate their own power. And Frederica, with her empire, she became their target.
And that's when the Pinkertons entered the picture. Sounds like things were about to get serious.
Oh, they were a formidable force, yeah, representing this new era of professional law enforcement. And Frederica, who always seemed untouchable, suddenly she's facing a threat she can't escape.
Must have been a crushing realization for her, someone who was always in control.
It was a stark reminder that even the most cunning individuals can be brought down by forces larger than themselves. No one is above the law, no matter how clever.
So what happened? How did they catch her? Did they set some kind of trap?
The Pinkertons, masters of deception, infiltration, they set up this elaborate sting operation, carefully luring Frederica into a trap that would expose her activities.
So they finally arrested her.
Not exactly. Frederica, sensing the walls closing in, she fled the country, just before they could apprehend her.
Like something out of a movie.
It was a dramatic exit, yeah. Marking the end of an era, Frederica Mandelbaum, the godmother, vanished, leaving behind this legacy, both captivating and enigmatic.
It's almost fitting, isn't it? Evading capture, holding on to that mystery, disappearing into the shadows.
It adds to the legend for sure. But even though she was gone, her story continued to have an impact. A cautionary tale, but also a source of inspiration.
How so? It's hard to picture her as an inspiration.
Think about it. For those in power, her story reinforced vigilance, maintaining order, the need for stricter laws, more effective law enforcement. But for those on the margins, struggling, she represented someone who defied the odds, achieved success on her own terms, even if those terms were illegal. It's complex, her legacy. It sparks debate even today.
It's amazing how her story still resonates after all these years.
And that's why it's so important to revisit these forgotten parts of history. They challenge our assumptions, broaden our perspectives, remind us that the past isn't really past. It shapes our present in ways we might not realize.
This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Frederica's life and legacy. We've covered so much, from Frederica's start as an immigrant to becoming this criminal mastermind. But what about after she fled? Did she ever actually face justice?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? The Pinkertons, they did everything they could. But Frederica vanished. Poof.
Wow.
No one knows for sure what happened. Some say Canada, others Europe.
So she just got away with it all.
Well, she was never officially tried or convicted, that's for sure. But scot-free, not quite. Think about it. That threat of being caught, it hung over her head for the rest of her life, living in the shadows.
It's a good reminder that even if you escape the law, there's still consequences.
Absolutely. And for Frederica, those consequences went beyond just her own life, When her empire crumbled, it was like a shockwave. Through the criminal world, networks disrupted, old ways of doing things questioned. It's like she accidentally hit a reset button on organized crime.
So she changed how crime was done.
Yeah, I think so. Whoever came after her had to adapt, be more discreet, more sophisticated. She raised the bar, for the entire criminal underworld.
It's amazing how her story still has this ripple effect today, even though she's long gone.
Her legacy is, well, it's complicated. It's ambition, resilience, but also exploitation. And it shows us how crime itself is always evolving. It makes us think about some uncomfortable truths about our past, those blurred lines between right and wrong.
It shows how human ingenuity could be used for good or bad.
Exactly. Frederica was a product of her time, the Gilded Age. This obsession with wealth, with power, and morals often took a back seat.
But it's more than just a historical curiosity, right? There are still lessons for us today. Ambition, risk, the price you pay for operating outside the law.
It reminds us that history isn't just dates and names in a book. It's about lives, each with their own, triumphs and failures. And by studying them, we can understand our world better.
So what are the big takeaways here? What should our listeners be thinking about after this deep dive?
Well, I think there are a few key things to remember. First, power comes in many forms. It's not always violence or force. Frederica built her empire using her mind. strategy, understanding people. Second, we have to think about the context. The social, economic, political landscape of 19th century New York. It all matters. And finally, history is full of surprises. Even the most powerful can fall, and even the most forgotten stories can teach us valuable lessons.
It really makes you wonder, are there modern-day Fredericas out there right now, pushing those limits, chasing their ambitions?
It's a great question. With technology changing so fast, the global economy so complex, there are more chances than ever to, exploit the system. We have to learn from the past, be aware, and make sure that the chase for wealth and power doesn't come at the cost of justice, of doing the right thing.
That's a great point to end on. As you want to dig deeper, check out Margarite Fox's biography, The Talented Mrs. Mandelbaum. It'll challenge what you thought you knew about organized crime and the Gilded Age.
It's a fascinating read.
Well, that's it for this deep dive. See you next time, and until then, keep those minds curious.